An executive's playbook for future catastrophes. Hopefully it's not like putting each other in the hospital like we just heard about, but you never know. But lessons learned from the pandemic, 9/11, and other catastrophic events. So we have Matt from Alamo Drafthouse, we have Ross from Avalara, and it will be moderated by Jack McCullough, president of the Cfo Leadership Council. But before we turn the reins over to you guys, we have to read this about CPE. Be active in the chat, Q&A. And then 75% of the questions, the poll questions, will pop up in the chat. They'll say, hey, they have to, poll questions coming. You'll hear a doorbell sound. You have to answer 75% of the poll questions. You'll have 30 seconds to answer, blah, blah, blah. We'll do a test now for the people that just jumped in. If there's a test there, can you see the poll or not? Yes or no. If you can't see anything, then jump in the chat and Tax Forward will help you to be able to do that. That being said, yeah, let's turn it over. Matt, Ross, and Jack hosting the panel. It's all yours.
Okay. Well, thanks, John. Actually, I was going to cover CPE. Some of you know I've been at a conference all week, and we're offering CPE ourselves. And the primary thing that we do with these polling questions is we're trying to make sure that people aren't playing Angry Birds or something like that, or Pokemon Go, or whatever the hot game is these days. So, but the polling questions are good. They will be asked throughout the thing, and apparently you can skip one of those along the way. But just to make our conversation more interesting, if you could participate in all of them, I think it would be fantastic. So, gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
Thanks. So, and everyone else, welcome. So I woke up this morning and, just kind of wasn't cognizant of the calendar until today, but, and it occurred to me that we're discussing catastrophes on Friday the 13th in 2020. And I'm not really like a superstitious guy, but I do wonder if we're tempting fate just a little bit here. So, but I think it'll be fine. Anyway, my name is Jack McCullough. I am the president of the CFO Leadership Council. My first CFO job was from 1997 to 2002, meaning that I dealt with some incredible prosperity that was impacted by September 11th on my business. September 11th had a dramatic but short-lived negative impact on the global economy. The recovery economically was very quick. A lot of valuable lessons were learned during that period. But as it turns out, even having learned those lessons, we still weren't prepared for the impact of the coronavirus on the economy today. So, we'll talk about some things that we can learn and constantly improve. Again, the topic today is an executive's playbook for surviving catastrophes. Business leaders are facing the greatest challenges of their careers. And, the thing is, we've got two great CFOs on, and they agree, there's not exactly a pre-existing blueprint for running your company during a pandemic. The closest thing historically to what we're going through is probably the Spanish flu of 1918. And for one reason or another, the executives from 1918 weren't really available as consultants to us. And they didn't seem to take good notes either. But luckily for you, we've got some great panelists on board, and we are going to help you figure out some of the challenges you're facing. You mentioned the CPE. So before we go any further, gentlemen, why don't we take a moment and you can introduce yourselves.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Ross Tennenbaum. I am the CFO of Avalara. We're a cloud-based sales tax automation solution. And I had a previous career in investment banking and known Avalara for many years in that role and joined a couple of years ago. Interestingly, I took over as CFO on April 1st of this year, about 2 weeks after the pandemic really got rolling. So it was it's been an interesting ride in the last handful of months to help our business manage through all the challenges of this pandemic.
That makes a lot of timing is everything, right, Ross?
Exactly.
So, indeed. Matt, share your background a little bit if you would.
Yeah, Matt Vonderahe here. Thanks for having me today. I'm the CFO for the Alamo Drafthouse Cinema. We've got 41 venues pre-COVID around the country, mixing the dining, cinema, bar experience into one concept. When I'd heard that we were looking for folks to talk about, businesses impacted, I'd say the cinema industry is at the tip top. So we can talk more about that. I'm a multi-unit person by background. I was with the Limited Brands, was with Kinko's before and after they became FedEx Kinko's and FedEx Office, was with the Container Store for quite some time, and then now with the Alamo Drafthouse Cinema.
Cool. Well, you guys have certainly worked for some interesting companies. And what I like is very different paths as well. So, but cool. So why don't we start? And I guess I'll just ask the first one to Ross. And it seems like an obvious place to start. What's been the impact of the pandemic and the resulting economic downturn and all of the other upheaval that we've experienced on your business?
Yeah. I mean, Jack, I will say we have been fortunate because companies still need to be compliant with, tax, indirect taxes, whether it's sales tax in the U.S., VAT, GST. They still have to calculate, file, and remit. And it's interesting because many of our customers, many of you all out there, are having to change how you do business, whether it's more e-commerce, work from home, evolve your technology. There's a lot of change going on now in this environment. And so, we've really had to evolve. We've always done tax automation to help our clients that way, but we've had to evolve to be more of a relationship and a consultant in this. There's a lot of rule changes. There's a lot of, you can file later, you can pay later, and we've really evolved our business to be a partner to our customers and prospects to say, here's how you can manage through this. Here's some of the reliefs available to you, and here's how we can help you. And I think, we've always had a good ROI from automation. So, we're trying to also, from that perspective, help our customers maintain the compliance they need, try to get some ROI out of it, and try to, lower their some of their concerns that they're having to manage through this time. So it's been the biggest challenge for us, Jack, has been how do you take, 3,000 global employees and move them in a month from working in an office bay. We're mostly office based, very little work from home, move them in a month to all work from home. And when you do that, we'll talk about it more through this, the challenges of trying to manage through that, and where you thought you had good plan, disaster plans, continuity plans, and you realize there's a lot of things that are manual or require office or you're tethered to that you just didn't think through. And that's uncovering some really interesting things for us. And we've had to work through. And I think this is a call to action for everybody to figure this out as they have to now. But when we get beyond the pandemic, how do we continue to go further and not look back and really manage this?
Makes sense. Hey, so the first polling question is gone, and I will give you a chance to answer, Matt. But for those who have ears and not eyes, the question is, what's been the impact of the pandemic on your business? And 31% actually said positive, and 23% said little or no effect. 42% said negative, and 4% said catastrophic. So Matt, why don't you share your experience, and then you can both sort of, give your thoughts on the poll results, if they're surprising or not.
Sure. Yeah, I was in the 4% that selected catastrophic. The cinema industry has been in the headlines on a couple different fronts as of late. There's several industries that were particularly hit, be it airlines, resorts, retail, but I can say with a pretty high degree of confidence that the traditional cinema industry has probably been hit harder than just about anybody out there. Pre-COVID, we were growing leaps and bounds. We had 41 venues. What was it, March 18th? The world changed in a radical way. We closed everything down. We say we were struck by lightning because it was just so hard and fast, and the impact was just so pronounced. And since that time, and we'll touch on this, I think, throughout the panel, but we've we've had to lay off or furlough 95% of our, we've had some really atypical industry shifts with the studios. They're hesitant to put out more films. Those are investments for them. I respect where they're coming from, but they're not confident in a return. And so we're in the business of playing movies. And when your suppliers are not giving you much, it compounds your challenges. There's been a gravitation towards video on demand. We do not feel that's a long-term threat, but nonetheless, some real big changes, all happening, at once. And so we're optimistic about the future, but for right now, it's catastrophic.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people say, oh, the movie business, boo-hoo. So Tom Cruise only makes 14 million rather than 18 million for his next flick. But, people forget they're just, regular hardworking people that are part of that entire ecosystem. So, well, hopefully we'll come back. I mean, I know it's not the same business as yours, but like restaurants are struggling, and just about everybody I know, I went from being a 20% tipper to a 60% tipper. Just, I'm going to keep doing that for as long as I'm gainfully employed. And, a lot of people I know have taken a similar philosophy. So,
Yeah.
But back to the polling results, anything surprise you? I personally was a bit surprised that half of them said either it was favorable or no impact at all. That shocking to you guys, or?
I've been just so ingrained in such a challenging time. I think it's kind of imprinted on my psyche that everybody is going through a challenging time. At the same time, you watch the stock market and there's, some positive signals there. I was chatting with Ross a little bit early on when we were talking about this, and, different businesses, if you're in cloud software now, or if you're in, I'm curious to hear more about the folks on the panel, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that so many have had a positive impact and that more haven't been impacted in a more serious manner.
I wasn't surprised, Jack, because we see it in our business. We see a lot of businesses like Matt's business that are more challenged in this environment, and keep our prayers in that we get through this soon and that everybody can start to get back to some sense of a new normal. Matt's business and anyone else's out there. And then, in our business, so we see a lot of customers that have struggled, and we see a lot of prospects, that we've been talking to that are like, now's not a good time. And then on the other side of that, the other, sort of half or whatever it is, we see a lot of people that have changed the format of their business, that they've moved to e-commerce, or they've had to change systems and processes to enable more flexible work from home formats, and they need what we have, and they're doing well. So we've got a good balance in our business where, there's a whole new area of the economy that is accelerating the e-com, that are finding new ways to do this. So actually, that 50-50 doesn't surprise me from what we've seen.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because even this event, like this was supposed to be a live event, and, I'm friendly with Ashby, but the only reason I agreed to do it was a free trip to Colorado. So it's tremendously disappointing. So, but anyway, I want to chat a little about, what are the lessons that businesses are learning from this experience, not only, from your roles as finance leaders, but cross-functionally. What are you taking out of this, and, what can you share with our audience? And why don't we start with Matt first, just to change the order a little bit. And I understand another polling question is coming up momentarily.
Yeah. Jack, it was interesting early on, you made the point that, there's really not a playbook for something like this. And I will agree with that in a large way. So, to me, what I've learned, and it's kind of a basic concept, but that communication has been critical for us. And, if I think about my ecosystem, be it, my vendors that are selling me, food for the restaurant, drinks for the bar, they've got to feel exposed about what's going on with their customer. Our landlords, the liabilities they must feel. The employees are scared straight. Our investors, our banks have great concerns. And so it's, really important just to communicate, be honest to a fault. We have to have a much different outlook on our cash preservation, payment plans, how I can't take care of people that I normally would have in just an automatic, given way. And so I think that has been probably the biggest learning / facilitator of getting through this, is just being brutally honest with everybody, including, the employees that we've had to lay off and furlough, vendors that we can't pay, landlords that we're negotiating with. It's just, you cannot over communicate, in my opinion.
Cool. I'm going to read the polling results. Do you guys see the polling results as well, or is it just me?
I do.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
Yeah.
So again, for people who are who are not, can't see the screen, when do you think business as normal will return? And the options were the first half of 2021, the second half of 2021, sometime in 2022, and never. And 85% think it'll be the second half of 2021 or 2022. Only 4%, which I think is probably one person, thinks it'll be the first half of next year. And 11% think things will never return. What about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at that, so I said second half of 2021, but in my mind, what I was really thinking was, what does normal mean? The longer this goes, there's a new normal. When I think of normal, I want Matt's business to be doing well, and I want to be sitting in a movie theater. I want to be sitting at a restaurant comfortably. That to me is normal. What I would advise the group is, don't let us go back to normal for some of the other, parts of the, for all those that have found themselves ill prepared, for these things. This is a good time to keep marching forward and making sure, disaster planning and scenario planning and financial planning, all this, and we'll talk about some other specifics as we go on, that you keep driving forward. And like, if I think about B2B enterprise sales, why do we have to get on planes and do dinners and golfing events? We're relationship driven in the enterprise, but that can be more diversified. We can do it in a better way. When I think about all the investor meetings I do, they usually go, Jack, you wanted to go to Colorado. That's great. But like, people are going to things and it's impacting productivity. We're finding more ways and new ways to be productive, which is, there's great cost savings and there's more productivity that can be had. And I think there's some great benefits that could come out of this that we should try to make lasting post this. And so I just think there will be some new normal, and I think there can be some really good out of a new normal to come out of it.
Well said. Matt, final word on that?
Yeah, well said. I do agree that the second half of 21 is when we'll see, we're really counting on a large comeback. We've been working hard on our reemergence plans, working with our lenders, working with our investors to answer those exact questions. And, it's my responsibility to try to see the future, and it's never been more difficult than it is right now. And it's a great point about the new normal. Will we ever go back to everybody being in the office Monday through Friday, 9 to 5? I don't think so. But are we going to be completely remote? Absolutely not. It's a culture killer to not be and with your people. But do we think about that differently? And is the answer somewhere in between? And is the new normal somewhere in between? And I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, well, even like, think about people who work in Chicago, and even if you've never been, you're probably aware that there are dozens of 80-story buildings, and they're limiting it, 5 people at a time, blah, blah, blah. It's like, you're tacking 25 extra minutes onto your commute just to take the elevator. And if it really is a 25-minute commute, which I'm told it is, if you're on the top floor of some of these buildings, well, there's your lunch hour, right? It's,
right.
Everything's a little different. I work in a 3-story building. I can, walk up and down, but so, I don't have those sacrifices, but it's just remarkable, the things you sort of don't think of that we take as normal. So,
yeah. And Jack, Matt, that's a really good point related to mine on the people is, we think about it and we're working on it. We've seen some large public companies come out with, post pandemic, we're moving to 50% work from home. So we think about it as, percent working from home, percent in office, and percent flexible, like hoteling desks, they come in and out when need to. And that, when I talk about a longer term shift, I think, going back to the office, 100%, I don't think that's going to happen, nor should it. I think we should figure out how to be more flexible. It requires evolving how you stay productive when you're remote. It involves cultural shifts in how you maintain connectivity and social interaction while you do it. So I think, again, there's a lot of value out of it. And I think I hope we don't go back to just the norm of we're all going back to the office. I think there's going to have to be a permanent shift there.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Cool. Okay. So let's chat into the, the meat of the conversation, if you will. And so what is it that businesses can do to protect themselves against future catastrophes? And we sort of outlined this into topics, and we'll get through them as best we can, although there are several. But the obvious one from a financial standpoint, what can you do? And Ross, why don't you lead this one?
Yeah, I mean, I always say, CFO's first job is never to run out of cash, right? That's mission number one. And so, we haven't seen the liquidity crunch that we saw in the 2007, 2009 Great Recession, right? That there was a lot more concern around even money market, short-term, immediate liquidity drying up, cash crunches, and it was systemic throughout the system. So I haven't seen that. I haven't seen a lot of that across the economy, and hopefully we won't see any of that. I think that we've done a good job of that. But it's just a good reminder, that whether it's cash crunch or whether business comes down and the top line comes down and causes challenges, that it becomes really difficult to raise or get access to cash in tough times. So, it just goes to that age-old saying that you should, when times are good, you should pad your balance sheet to the best of your ability, and you should have other sources of cash, credit lines, ways that you can wade through. For some people say 6 months, some people say a year. Each business is different, but you've got to have that, and commensurate with that is the scenario planning. I fail to this is like, when you think about scenario planning in normal times, you think about, the high plan, the good plan, the better plan, the best plan. Not a lot of businesses, I find when I talk to CFOs, do the bad plan and the worst plan, right? And so as soon as COVID hit, I'm sitting there, hair on fire, if I had any, modeling all the bad things that could happen. Well, I think it's part of routine, model the negatives even in good times, and make sure you've got an action plan for how you're going to manage employees, how you're going to manage costs, how you're going to manage cash, and you've got lifelines to go after. It seems obvious now, but I know a lot of people were not ready for it when March came.
Makes sense. And I'm just going to slide this question about Matt. I think you're likely to have a different perspective on this.
Well, yeah, I mean, the automatic thinking is to have, cash in your balance sheet. But it was just said that, nobody could have envisioned how bad could be when it comes to my industry. And I just want to pause for a second. We're very confident in the future. We're not going anywhere. We're in the middle of it now. And so I just want to make sure I'm not coming off, too doom and gloom. I mean, it's terrible right now. But yeah, so you can't have enough cash on the balance sheet. We couldn't have. We're kind of in startup mode. We've got some private equity investors with, some debt. So a lot of cash isn't something that we had the flexibility to have. And I mean, this has been, really a radical environment. I mean, we immediately stopped cash going out the door. And I mean, completely. And I'm talking to banks, to landlords. I mean, it's a very, very short list of truly critical vendors that we had to pay. Our employees got to keep the lights on. I mean, we're literally having conversations like this, looking at invoices, and it's painful. It's embarrassing. Do I have to pay this vendor to survive? And so it was just cash control to a degree that I didn't think possible. And it's going on to this day. We've got 6 venues open. They are kind of breaking even on an EBITDA cash flow standpoint, and but more are closed. And so there's this ongoing process of maintaining our cash, working with our banks to get a mutually beneficial outcome. Yeah, everyday cash management. It's been nothing like I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's like it's unrealistic to think that you could have financially prepared for this, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's
cool.
right.
So we've got some polling results, and I know you guys can see them, but again, I'll read them out loud. But so the question is, companies that survive crises are the ones who invest in the future. However, some companies are battling for survival and can't look toward the long term. Which best describes your company's approach? And it was pretty well balanced. A little less than a third are proactively investing in the future. 12% are focused just on short-term survival. A little more than a third are focused on a blend of long and short-term, and fully 1/4 of them aren't really sure. So what do you guys think? Any surprises there? I kind of sense what bucket you guys are in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that seems consistent with the first poll about, the balance of, who's people doing, reasonably well and not so well. We've spent since March, April, we've spent a lot of time, modeling out where things are going to go as a publicly traded company and having to manage those expectations. And we spent a lot of time as well, not to Matt's extreme, but a lot of time as well, figuring out the short term, figuring out 2020, figuring out, where we have to dial back investments, where we need to keep going, and how we can support our employees and how we can, adapt and adjust. So, we've definitely spent a lot of time in there. And so there's been a lot of short-term focus. I think now as we're coming towards the back of 2020, we've shifted a little bit more gear to the longer term, as we hope to see we're moving towards hopefully a vaccine and hopefully moving out of this. Where are the investments that we should be making to start to think again about the long-term plan? Because as Matt said, business is here to stay. I'm going to be back in the movies as soon as I can. And people are going to continue buying tax compliance software. So at some point, you got to move to the long term. So we've started to do that. I know Matt's in the short term every day. But it sounds like, he's also thinking about, what's coming next.
Yeah, we are. We were talking about the recovery and modeling out the bridge from here to Q1 to Q2 to Q3. In the same time, we're starting to think long term about shifts in the business. We've done some interesting experiments with what we call private theater. You want to come in and rent the entire theater without having to have concern for people outside of your bubble. That's been a huge success for us, and it's really had some light bulbs going off. And what is the perfect size venue going forward? Do we think about getting into smaller markets? Is this private thing here to stay? We've started a video on demand. So there has been too much short term, but there is a healthy dose of how do we come out of this thing stronger? So there's a good mix now. If you would ask me this 6 weeks ago, it was more short-term focus.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting. Go ahead, Ross.
No, I was going to say the ingenuity, like American ingenuity here, of people adapting to business. Like the private theater is a great example, and then that however that manifests itself going forward into smaller private. I don't know how it's going to play out, but something cool will come out of it. The food delivery service, streets being shut down, so that you can just have socially distant meals. There's just so much that has changed already, in how we do business and in e-commerce and how we as consumers interact with businesses and each other. It's pretty amazing. And again, as we talk about the long term, this will strike a new equilibrium, a new normal, and it also come up with new things that we don't even imagine yet, to Matt's point, that will be, game changing. So I think there's some really interesting things to come.
It makes sense. So, talking about finance and, given our backgrounds, it's a good place to start. But culturally, so what can companies do to, protect themselves for the next catastrophe? And, I'm older than you. I'm 2 years or so, I'm out of the game. So, maybe I won't be facing one, but a couple of young folks like you probably will be dealing with a major catastrophe or two before your career's over. Cultural standpoint, what can you guys do? And Matt, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I think that, it's kind of obvious here, but everyone's going to remember this, right, for the rest of our lives. We still talk about 9/11. We're going to, talk about this. And, I'm kind of picturing a cultural renaissance with people getting out of the house and, when this is over. And so we're not there yet. So culturally, I mean, this has been the hardest thing. I care more about my employees than anybody. And as CFOs, we've all managed, ups and downs, and unfortunately layoffs and furloughs are a reality. But to do it to this extreme has been, very challenging. When you compound that with the work from home, there's a sense of disconnection that is, really difficult to surmount. So we do a lot of virtual happy hours. We do whatever we can to stay connected, but culturally, I had this one figured out. I wish I had more to tell you.
Yeah, I mean,
Ross, how about you?
well, I would say this one's been really tough for us. We've got a great, strong culture. We do a lot of things together, socially in office, or, picnic type things. We do a lot of things with our customers, with our partners, so we are definitely an in-person type culture. And I think, there's been some burnout, and there's some struggles with our employees around that lack of interaction, togetherness. And so we really spent a lot of time thinking about how we shift the culture of the virtual. And remember, as we think about the employee base in businesses migrating to some work from home forever, you got to think about how you do shift and create a virtual culture as well as an in-office culture. And so we put a lot of thought into that. And we don't have it all perfect yet, but virtual events like we started an Ava Kids program where, your kids can, a lot of people are trying to manage their kids at home, as well as their jobs. And so it's a 45-minute session where, there's kids related things that somebody puts on, or a play or something to keep their attention, like yoga, meditation. These aren't expensive things. We've had a lot of people in the community donate time, how to cook. We had a local barbecue outfit teach us how to cook barbecue. They didn't charge anything. It was just, they wanted business advertising and all that. And so we really tried to figure out how to engage. And I encourage people, I try to do it is like, have the virtual lunch, have the virtual happy hour, do the team meetings. And just,
Give the interruption. I just want to let people know there is a polling question up. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm done. It's however you can do it, overinvest in creating a virtual culture, because I think it's here to stay. And I think it gives your employees hope and engagement. And I think you earn a lot of, value out of that.
Makes sense.
I love the yoga and the barbecue. I wrote both of those down. We're always looking for ideas, and those are great.
Yeah, and it helps your community members. Again, it doesn't have to cost $1. It helps your community members and it helps your employees stay engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because I'm the president of a very small company. We have 26 employees, but yet we have all kinds of challenges. I tell people that, yeah, there's 26 of us, but everybody's got a unique situation, and when the crisis hit, like 3 of my employees were single people and lived by themselves, and they weren't supposed to leave their home. It's like, so I was calling them, every couple of days just to make sure that they weren't going insane and climbing the walls. And then, you don't know people's situations. You've got a lot of parents trying to take care of their kids with education and everything else. And, at least a few of us have elder care issues with an older parent living with them. They got to take care of them because they're the most at risk. I personally am the father of 2 special needs kids, so I'm very sensitive. I have different issues than a lot of other people might have. So you really need to just, take great care of your team. And one story I tell people, like, I was working around the clock, and then, it was actually morning, like 1 o'clock in the morning, my executive assistant shot me an email. I'm like, that's strange. She, you just couldn't have waited till 8 o'clock, but I responded right away. She said, I didn't really need an answer. I was just trying to see if you were still awake. Why don't you go to bed for a few hours? Remember to take care of the boss too, because the CEO of your company, chances are it's not Wonder Woman or Superman. It's probably just a regular person who needs some taking care of. Anyway, the most recent polling question, and this is mostly opinion, but a strong consensus emerged. What do you expect your company's work from home policy to be when the crisis is over? And the options were: work from home will be mandatory. Most employees will be expected to come to the office. Employees can choose, and 15 and something else. And 58% said that employees will choose. The other three were roughly even. What do you guys think?
I chose something else because it was a little too black and white as far as mandatory or completely leaving it up to the employee. I too, Ross mentioned, hoteling. I envision some type of mix of, is it Monday, Wednesday, Friday? I don't know, but there has to be some type of interaction, tied in with big strategy meetings or things of that nature. I was skeptical of how productive I ended up being from home. I guess I was kind of old school and thought that if I wasn't in the office, because I used to go to the office on the weekends instead of working from home, I just felt more productive there. But you can't see it here. I now have my dual monitor set up, my laptop here. It's, like I'm at the office. And after just a little transition, I got over that. And so I think like from just an employee retention standpoint, I mean, if you can offer it a benefit that, it's flex schedule and you get the job done, I get energized by that side of it. How can we make it, a benefit to the employee and make us more productive at the same time?
Makes sense. Ross?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. Like I said before, to me, it's about there'll be some percentage that may need or want to be office based. There'll be some percentage that may need or want to be work from home, and I think we should support that. And then that flex in the middle, whether that's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, whether it's for big meetings. But I just think you'll see a much larger percentage. Some companies have come out, 50% of their workforce they expect to be, more flex based. And so when you need to come in for major meetings, you do, and when you need the space, you do, and when you don't, you don't. And so I don't know where it comes out. It'll come out different for everyone. But those are the three buckets I think about. And I think, option C there, employees can choose whether or not they work from home. That kind of fits that point I'm making of it's a flexible workforce.
Interesting. We have our first question. It's not really a question, but it's from Bridget Donnelly. And Matt, she just wants you to know that her favorite online yoga instructor is fightmasteryoga.com if you're looking for some ideas.
I'm writing that down.
Got it.
So I'll tell you, I actually started doing some workout videos. I'm just following along on YouTube. And I forget the woman's name, but she's got a channel on YouTube. She's ripped as all hell. And I liked her workouts because she mostly uses dumbbells, and that's what I have at home. And I'm like feeling good because, she's a lot younger than me, and, she's 3% body fat. I'm like, wow, I'm doing the same weight as her. She's from Ireland. I then realized she's doing kilograms and I'm doing pounds. So no, she's doing 2.2 times the weight I'm doing. It was a little bit of a deflation thing. Bridget, thanks for the question. And we need to talk because from your reaction earlier, I figured out you're probably a big Guns N' Roses fans like I am. So if anyone else has any questions, I am monitoring that box. But, and we've got about 10 minutes left. So why don't we keep going a little bit, but we talked about, the cultural standpoint. Why don't we talk about from a legal standpoint? Is there anything that, that we can protect ourselves from a legal standpoint? Again, with the caveat that as far as I know, neither one of you are lawyers, and you may have been for your current jobs. So.
Go ahead, Ross.
Yeah, I didn't have a great legal one. We've come in on the legal and maybe human capital side. There's things in these trying times you need to do, whether it be, layoffs or changes that you need to make with your customers, changes you need to make to terms and conditions. There's a number of things like that have come up where we've had to work through, the legal side of it. But from a planning, there's nothing that stuck out to me that from a planning point of view, we should have done different in a major way. There's been a lot of in the moment, we got to figure out, we need to make these changes. And whenever you're making changes, you're bumping up with some either, HR boundary or some legal boundary. And so I'd say they're a big part of the the core party here of in the core in our COVID task force of trying to figure out what we got to do and what we got to change, and they're an important voice in that. So they need to be part of the program. But I didn't have a great, like, you know, what can we do from a legal perspective, you know, to protect going forward.
Great. We have a couple of questions. You guys mind if I throw them out?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. And someone asked one in the chat. So if you do have one, I'm not really monitoring chat, but I am monitoring the Q&A box. But this is from Tammy Meyer, and she's just wondering what's going to happen to the commercial real estate industry if we don't go back to the office. Great question, right? So,
That's a great one.
Yeah, I'm not a commercial real estate expert, but, you know, I saw that. It's interesting because when you ask about legal, you know, my industry, retail, you know, the legalities with the landlords has been a huge conversation, and it kind of dovetails into commercial real estate and what's going to happen. And what I mean by that is, and it's been all over the headlines about what retailers did and did not pay rent throughout portions of COVID. And it's been oddly fascinating to see the different stances. You know, there's some landlords out there that are demanding that retailers, that restaurants, that those tenants that were not able to open pay rent. But I'll just offer up a little anecdote. So there's clauses in many rents that say if you operate your business in a manner that is illegal, that your lease will be terminated. And so there were a lot of cinemas, a lot of restaurants, retailers that if we would have opened, would have been, our leases would have been terminated. But at the same time, you're wanting me to pay rent in a period where if I opened, I'd be terminated. So it's just kind of a legal anecdote, and I think it's going to be in the press for years. And so, you know, with commercial real estate, that's going to be, I think, the final chapter of COVID as it's kind of working its way through the, you know, trickling down the economy. Is, you know, is there going to be a permanent change to officing for all the reasons that we just said?
Yeah, I think it's right on. And, you know, I put commercial real estate, unfortunately, in with like the airlines, where it's going to be multi-years to get back to where we were. You know, and when I talk to some of the CFO groups I'm in, you know, a lot of them are, you know, pulling back rent or getting out of offices. You know, when you have a bunch of regional offices and everyone's working well from home, if you can do that, a lot of people are shuttering some of their offices. And you know, if you believe what I believe about some meaningful percent will remain work from home for the future, then Tammy's point's right on, or she's not making a point, she's asking, but, you know, it's going to be a challenge for commercial real estate. So unfortunately, you know, I'm not the expert, but I think that's one of the tougher camps to be in, I think, assuming we don't return to the old normal and there's some new normal.
That makes a whole lot of sense. There's a survey question going on. There's also another question from Ken Wright. And again, we live in 3 different states, so we can all take a crack at this. Does government in each state take business and employment in mind with decisions being made with shutdown, no shutdown, et cetera? And Matt, you want to lead?
Yeah, this one hits close to home, right? The I don't want to say laws, but the regulations state by state vary tremendously. There's a certain city on the West Coast where there's a restaurant next door that is able to operate at 50% capacity and serve food, but the cinema next door can only have 25% capacity, and we cannot serve food. So to me, you know, I trust that everybody's coming from the right place when they make these regulations, but there is a lack of common sense in the way that a lot of these regulations come out. And I think that one is a perfect example. There's literally a restaurant next door, smaller than our venues. They can be at 50. We can't be at 25. I'm talking one particular theater. So, you know, I get a little worked up about how it goes state to state. And, you know, are the states taking it into account? I think it varies state by state by state.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in Washington State, and I think it's more about the people and safety of people and less about the business, taking into account. That's my belief. There's some states where are more about the people and the economy. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
It makes sense. I mean, Massachusetts, we are, despite our reputation, I don't think our reputation reflects reality. But, we're a very pro-business state, but we're also very pragmatic as a state too. And, I'd say safety is the first thing that our government's thinking of, and getting people back to work. I mean, whenever there's been an economic crisis, Massachusetts is usually one of the first states to rebound. Just because, we've got a pretty good innovation engine here, a lot of young professionals because we have so many colleges and universities in the area. And, there are no jobs, they'll start a company and create one for themselves. So, so the last polling question, this is actually pretty good because I actually use this in a different one. So having survived this crisis, is your company better prepared for the next one? And the options are management's taking proactive steps and will be significantly better prepared, learn some lessons, so we'll be a bit better prepared, not really sure, or did not learn any lessons. And the good news is 93% gave one of the first two answers. So, and nobody said that they didn't learn any lessons. 7% just said that they weren't sure one way or the other. So any reaction to that? And we're actually coming right across the ceiling.
No, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna I don't know how anybody couldn't learn something from this horrible catastrophe. There's been too many lives lost. There's been so much damage on so many levels across the world that there has to be some good that comes out of it in terms of lessons learned. And so, be that business, be that emotional, be it family, whatever it is, I'm in Camp A.
There you go, Ross.
Yeah, I second that, and I would just say, when we get to the other side of this, keep going. We've fixed things, we've learned things, created new disaster plans, that do whatever we've done. But if we believe the world's going to change, for the long term, just my advice is don't stop the task force when COVID stops. Keep going on pushing forward with innovation and what you can do to protect yourselves and leveraging the lessons you learned.
Makes sense. Okay, we are actually at the ceiling. There's actually going to be some networking afterwards, I understand. Hey, John, welcome back, my man. Yep. So unfortunately, my conference is going on and I'm actually on stage in like 10 minutes. So okay. I hope I remember what the topic is. But before I go, just, we're in a similar business. I have live events for CFOs and content for CFOs, and you folks have them for tax people. And I've gotten to know, the team here, Ashby and some others during this crisis because we've talked and commiserated. And I just want to give you all the credit in the world. When, this hit, Ashby never said, what's going to happen to me? Her concern was, how can I take care of the members? How can I take care of the sponsors? And, I hope the members appreciate how dedicated this team is to, helping them be successful. And it's a great template to follow, because I'll be honest, I had a little bit of woe is me when this happened. And, talking to Ashby, I fell right out of it.
Yeah, and it's definitely a lot of work to put on the virtual. It's not easy to just flip the switch. I mean, even like friends of mine, they're like, oh, well, you're a speaker. Aren't you just doing virtual thing? I'm like, I wish it had a different name that had nothing to do with speaking. It's like, cats and dogs are both animals, but they are not the same. Like, they're not the same. And it's a lot of work. So I appreciate you guys being a part of this as well. And, keeping the discussion interactive and answering the questions on the go. So thank you so much, Jack and Matt and Ross. And we will have some networking. I understand, Jack, if you have to duck out, totally cool. But before we get into that, I was going to take just 5 minutes to talk with Liz from Avalara. Liz Armbruster. So, hey, Liz, how are you?
Okay. Gentlemen, thanks. I enjoyed the process. And thank you for the opportunity, and have a great rest of the conference.
Definitely. Thanks, Jack. Have a good one, man.